My name is Augustus Turner. I am 68 years old, a retired structural engineer living in Atlanta. For 3 years, I have been healing from a wound inflicted not by time but by silence, a silence from my only daughter, Maya. After 3 years of nothing, I received a letter. It was waiting in our mailbox, a thin, flimsy envelope that felt lighter than air. I was so overjoyed my hands spotted with age were shaking. "Annette!" I yelled, running inside. "Annette, it's from Maya. She wrote to us. I was about to tear it open to finally hear from my baby girl. But my wife Annette, my partner of 45 years, put her hand on mine. Her touch was cold. Her voice was sharp. Wait, Gus." My joy evaporated. "What is it? What's wrong?" She just pointed at the envelope. "You're a man who builds bridges, Gus. Don't you see it? Look closer." I looked, and my blood ran cold. It wasn't the handwriting. It was the stamp. In the top right corner, the American flag was flying upside down. If you are listening to this story, please let me know in the comments where you are tuning in from. Hit that like button and subscribe because you will not believe what happens next. Annette walked to the kitchen door and twisted the deadbolt. The click echoed in the sudden heavy silence. She didn't have to say a word. Neither did I. My hands stopped shaking. A moment ago they were trembling with a father's joy. Now they were steady. The hands of an engineer. The hands of a man who understands that one tiny flaw, one small crack can bring the whole structure down. And this letter, this flimsy piece of paper, it was a warning sign. This was not a letter of reconciliation. This was a distress signal. I looked at Annette. Her eyes, usually so warm, were now sharp and focused. She spent 40 years as a registered nurse. She knows a crisis when she sees one. "Gus," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Your stupid game with the stamps." My stupid game. The memory hit me like a ton of bricks. Me, 45 years old. Maya, just 10. I used to collect stamps. I'm an engineer. I love the details, the intricate designs on a tiny square of paper. I bought her a little blue album for her own collection. She'd sit on my lap in my study, and I'd show her the rare ones. I told her about the prisoner's signal from the Civil War, how soldiers would send letters home with the stamp inverted to signal they were alive but captive. One night, pointing to a picture of the famous inverted Jenny stamp, I made a joke. "Listen, baby girl," I said, "if you ever get in real trouble, I mean real trouble, and you can't talk, you send your old dad a letter. Put the stamp on upside down. That'll be our code. I'll know you need me. I'll come find you." She had giggled. "Okay, Daddy," like a spy. A silly, forgotten promise between a father and his daughter. 28 years had passed. I hadn't thought about it once, but Maya remembered, and that fool Derek Hayes, that white shoe investment broker she married. He was too arrogant, too self-absorbed to ever notice the placement of a stamp. He would have seen the letter as a necessary step in his plan. He wouldn't see the message hidden in plain sight. I didn't tear the envelope. I am a methodical man. I went to the junk drawer and took out the old brass letter opener I've used for 30 years. I would not rip this. I would deconstruct it. Annette stood across the kitchen island, her arms crossed. She was my rock. "Whatever it says, Gus," she said, "we face it together, like we always have." I nodded. I slid the blade under the flap, a clean, precise cut. I treated it like a fragile blueprint or an unexploded bomb. It felt like both. The envelope was cheap paper, the kind you buy in a drugstore pack. I tilted it, and a single sheet of paper slid out. Not fine stationery. It was a sheet of cheap, wide-ruled notebook paper, the kind a child uses. It had been torn from a spiral binder, the frayed, fuzzy edges proving it. I unfolded it on the counter beneath the harsh kitchen light. Annette let out a little gasp. The handwriting. It was shaky, trying to be cheerful, but it was forced. "Dear Mom and Dad." I read the words aloud, my voice flat. "Dear Mom and Dad, I am so sorry I haven't been in touch. Things have been crazy, but the great news is Derek and I have moved. We're in Florida now, starting fresh in Miami. The weather is beautiful. I'm doing well, and I miss you both. This is our new address. Please write back. Love, Maya." The words felt like poison, fake, hollow. Annette was the first to speak. She pointed at the signature. "That's not her handwriting, Gus. Not really. Look at it. It's shaky. It's terrified." She was right. Maya's signature was usually a confident, flowing script. This looked like it was written by someone with a fever, or a gun to their head. The silence of the last 3 years suddenly made sense. The last time I saw my daughter was at a steakhouse in Buckhead. Derek, her husband of 6 months, had called the dinner. He was all smiles and expensive cologne. He'd ordered a $90 bottle of wine. Then he'd laid out his plan. He wanted $100,000. He called it a seed investment in a can't-miss real estate venture. I'm a structural engineer. I've spent my entire life evaluating foundations. I know when a footing is cracked. I know when the concrete mix is bad. I looked at Derek Hayes, at his slicked back hair and his $5,000 watch, and I knew. He wasn't just a weak foundation. He was rotten all the way to the rebar. I told him no. His smile vanished. He called me a relic. He said I was too old and too black to understand modern finance. He told me I was holding Maya back, and Maya, she cried. She accused me of controlling her, of not trusting her judgment. She got up, took his hand, and walked out of that restaurant. That was 3 years ago. We hadn't heard a word since. No calls, no birthdays, nothing. Until today. The letter was a lie. But why? My engineering mind took over. Analyzed the components. I looked past the shaky words and picked up the envelope again. And that's when I saw it. The second flaw in the design. Annette, I said, my voice low. The postmark. She leaned in. The letter said Miami, Florida. The return address was a fancy high-rise in Miami. But the postmark, the black ink stamped by the U.S. Postal Service. My God, Annette whispered. It's not from Florida. No, I said, tracing the letters with my finger. It was mailed yesterday from the South Atlanta sorting facility, 15 miles from this house. My first instinct was rage, pure hot paternal rage. I wanted to grab my keys. I wanted to drive to the last address we had for them, an apartment in Alpharetta. I wanted to kick the door down and drag my daughter out. Annette saw the look in my eyes. She put her hand on my chest. No, Gus, don't you dare. He has her, I growled. He's here in Atlanta and he's lying. I know, she said, her voice impossibly calm. And if we go there just two old angry parents, what do you think he'll do? He'll panic, he'll run, and he'll take her with him. We lose her forever. We can't go in there like parents, Gus. We have to go in like engineers, methodical, precise, cold. She was right. This was not a rescue. This was a demolition. You have to find the load-bearing walls before you swing the sledgehammer. I took a deep breath. I let the rage cool and settle into something hard and heavy and useful. I picked up my phone. I didn't call 911. What would I say? That my grown daughter sent me a letter. They would laugh at me. I scrolled down my contact list. I pressed a name I hadn't called in 6 months. The phone rang twice. A low, gravelly voice answered. Gus, it's been a while. Malik, I said. I need you. Malik Brown and I go back 50 years. We grew up in the West End playing stickball in streets that don't exist anymore. He became a detective. I became an engineer. He knows this city's cracks better than I know concrete. He retired 5 years ago, but a man like Malik never really retires. He just stops cashing the checks. What's the trouble? He asked. It's Maya, I said. I explained the letter, the stamp, the postmark, the Miami lie. Malik was silent for a moment. He's holding her, Gus, but he's sloppy. That's good. Sloppy men make mistakes. I need to know where they are, I said. The postmark was from the facility near the airport. The letter said Miami. He's trying to build a false trail. Give me the addresses, Malik said. The fake one in Miami and the post office. I'll make some calls. Don't you or Annette do anything. Don't call her phone. Don't go to their old apartment. You sit tight. You're a civilian now, Gus. Let me do my work. I hung up. The waiting was the hardest part. Annette and I sat at the kitchen table for 2 hours. We didn't talk. We just waited. Every tick of the clock was a hammer blow. Finally, my phone buzzed. It was Malik. Okay, he said, and I could hear the tightness in his voice. I've got bad news, and I've got worse news. The bad news, the Miami address is a short-term Airbnb. It was rented for 2 days under a false name. Derek is definitely building a fantasy. And the worst news, I asked, my stomach churning. "The post office," Malik said. "The sorting facility on Vesta. It's across the street from a row of check-cashing places and pawn shops. I have a friend who still wears a badge. He pulled the security footage from the shops on that block. 10 a.m. yesterday." He paused. "What did you see, Malik?" I demanded. "A woman, Gus. She matches Maya's description. Hoodie, pulled up sunglasses on. She was thin, looked sick. She pawned a piece of jewelry." Annette, who had been listening on speaker, let out a sound, a small, wounded animal sound. She put her hand over her mouth. "What was it?" I asked, though I already knew. "Looked like a necklace," Malik said. "Pearls. An older style. She got $800 for it." I closed my eyes. I didn't need to look at Annette to know. That was her mother's necklace. The only thing Maya had from her grandmother. She had worn it at her wedding. She swore she would never, ever take it off. They weren't just in Atlanta. They were broke, and he was selling off her last remaining ties to us one piece at a time. This wasn't just control. This was erasure. I hung up with Malik and the kitchen was silent again. But this time, it was a different kind of silence. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was heavy, full of ugly, unspoken truths. My daughter was sick. She was broke. She was selling her grandmother's pearls for grocery money. Annette finally spoke, her voice hollow. "Why, Gus? Why would he let her send a letter at all if he's got her that controlled, that scared? Why let her contact us? It makes no sense." And that was the central question. The load-bearing point of failure I needed to find. My mind started working, clearing away the fog of a father's grief and letting the engineer take over. Derek Hayes is a con man, a parasite. He is arrogant. He thinks he's the smartest man in every room. He wouldn't let Maya send a letter out of the goodness of his heart. He wouldn't allow it unless it served him. The letter was a tool, the fake Miami address, the cheerful lying words. It was all a performance. He wanted us to believe they were fine and far away. He needed us to believe that. But Maya, my smart, brave girl, she had slipped in her own message. The stamp, the inverted flag. I'm captive. So you have two opposing forces in one envelope, his lie and her truth. Why would he construct this lie right now? What was he planning? What event was on the horizon that made it necessary for him to establish a false narrative? He wasn't just running from the people he scammed. He was running towards something, a payday. And suddenly, a cold, dark thought began to form in my mind. A piece of the puzzle I had forgotten. I looked at Annette. "The bank," I said. "We need to go to the bank, not the ATM. I need to see our safe deposit box." Annette didn't ask why. She just nodded, her jaw set. She went to the hall closet, grabbed her purse and her light spring coat. I took my keys from the hook by the door. Not a word was exchanged. We moved like two partners on a job, each understanding their role without needing a blueprint. The drive to the bank was the longest 20 minutes of my life. I drove our old sedan, the one I'd had for 10 years. My hands were steady on the wheel. 10 and 2. I am a man who respects fundamentals. I obeyed the speed limit. I used my turn signals. Beside me, Annette sat perfectly still, her purse in her lap, looking straight ahead through the windshield. We passed people on the street, kids on bikes, mailmen doing their routes. A normal Atlanta afternoon. Inside our car, it felt like the air before a tornado. Thick, heavy, charged with something terrible. We parked in the bank's lot. It was a solid, old-school brick building, the kind of place that looked like it could withstand anything. I hoped it could withstand us. We walked inside. The lobby was bright. Tellers were smiling, customers were filling out deposit slips. The mundane sounds of life, of money changing hands, echoed on the marble floor. We didn't stop. We didn't get in line. I walked straight past the velvet ropes, past the loan officers' desks, to the heavy oak door at the back. The plaque read, "Mr. Mason, Branch Manager." I'd been banking here for 35 years. I'd built the extension on Mason's house. I knocked once hard and opened the door without waiting. Mason looked up, surprised, from a pile of paperwork. "Gus, Annette, is everything all right?" "We're fine, Jim," I said, my voice leaving no room for small talk. "I need to access my safe deposit box, right now." His professional smile faltered. He saw the look in my eyes. He saw the set of Annette's jaw. He didn't ask questions. He just grabbed a key from his drawer and stood up. "Of course, follow me." He led us through a locked gate down a short flight of stairs to the vault. The air grew colder. It smelled of old paper and steel. The vault door itself was a masterpiece of engineering, a foot-thick circle of polished metal and interlocking bolts. Mason used his key, then I used mine. The mechanism turned with a satisfying heavy clunk. He pulled the door open and we walked into the cage. Rows upon rows of silent metal boxes. Our secrets, our lives cataloged in steel. Mason located our box number 314 and used both keys again. He pulled out the long, heavy metal container and handed it to me. "The private room is right there, Gus," he said, gesturing to a small, windowless booth. "Thank you, Jim," I said. He nodded, understanding he was dismissed. Annette and I stepped into the room. I placed the box on the small laminate table. I locked the door. It was just the two of us, the box and the single buzzing fluorescent light above. Annette put her hand on the lid. "Gus," she said, "what did you do?" I lifted the heavy steel lid. Annette leaned in. The box wasn't full of cash or glittering jewels. I don't believe in things you can lose. I believe in structure. The box was full of order. Our house deed, my old honorable discharge papers from the Army Corps of Engineers, our marriage certificate, and underneath them all, a thick leather-bound portfolio heavy as a brick. I pulled it out and laid it on the small table. The gold embossing on the cover was stark under the fluorescent light. It read, "The Maya Turner Irrevocable Trust." Annette knew I had set up a trust for Maya. We had discussed it, but she never knew the full details. No one did. Only me and the lawyers at the firm downtown. That was by design. "What did you do, Gus?" she had asked me. "I didn't do anything, Annette," I said, my fingers tracing the gold letters. "I prepared." I worked for 45 years as a structural engineer. My whole life, my entire identity has been about building things that last. I've designed skyscrapers in the Atlanta skyline that can withstand hurricane-force winds. I've built bridges that thousands of families drive across every single day, trusting their lives to my math, to my concrete, to my steel. You cannot do that job for nearly half a century without learning one fundamental, unshakable truth. Everything depends on the foundation. If the foundation is weak, if the concrete mix is wrong, if the rebar is too thin, if the ground beneath it is unstable, it doesn't matter how beautiful the building is. It doesn't matter how tall it scrapes the sky. It is not a question of if it will fall. It is only a question of when. I love my daughter more than my own life, but I always saw her flaw. She has my heart, but she has her mother's trusting soul. She looks for the good in people, even when there is none to be found. I saw it in high school with the friends she chose. I saw it in college. And then 4 years ago, she brought Derek Hayes home for Sunday dinner. I shook his hand. It was soft. His eyes were quick. He wore a $5,000 watch, but his shoes were cheap. I saw his foundation in the first 5 minutes. All facade, no substance. All surface, no steel. He was a human sinkhole. And I saw my smart, beautiful daughter, my only child, getting ready to build her entire life on top of him. So I did what I do best. I built a fail-safe. I built a retaining wall around her future. I took the majority of my life's savings, everything I had built, and I locked it away. Annette and I, we have our pensions. We have the house. We are fine. This was for Maya. This was to protect her from him. I opened the portfolio. The legal language was dense, but I knew every word by heart. I had written some of them myself. The terms are simple. I told Annette, my voice quiet in that cold, sterile room. She gets the interest payments every month, enough to live on, enough to be comfortable. But the principal, the core sum, the real money, is locked. I tapped the thick paper. It is protected, Annette, from creditors, from lawsuits, and specifically from spouses. It cannot be signed over. It cannot be co-signed. It cannot be legally coerced. It is hers and hers alone. Annette looked at the paper, then at me. But she can get it right, eventually. Yes, I said. The entire sum, the full amount that I have spent a lifetime building for her. It is all to be dispersed to her, and only to her when she meets one single simple condition. Annette waited. It is released, I said, on her 30th birthday. Annette looked at me, her eyes wide, the blood draining from her face. She was a nurse. She's trained to see patterns, to connect symptoms to a diagnosis. And she had just seen the pattern. Her voice was a strained whisper. Gus, her birthday. When is Maya's 30th birthday? My mind was still on the legal text, the clauses and subsections. I answered without thinking, June 14th. Why? Annette slowly lifted her hand and pointed to the small digital watch on her wrist. "Gus," she said, her voice shaking. "Today is June 9th. I stared at her. My heart, which had been beating with a slow, cold anger, gave one sickening thud. 5 days. "My God," I whispered. "It's this Friday." The pieces didn't just fall into place. They slammed together like a collapsing building. The 3 years of silence, the sudden desperate letter, the fake Miami address, the lie about being okay, the postmark from Atlanta, the pawned necklace. It all made a terrible, perfect sense. This wasn't just about Derek being broke. This was about a deadline, a multi-million-dollar deadline that was exactly 5 days away. "He's been playing a long game," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "He isolated her for 3 years, wore her down, broke her, sold off her past. Now he's cashing out. He needs her signature," Annette said, her mind racing. "On her 30th birthday, she gets the money, but he needs her to sign it over to him. He can't do that if she's a missing person. He can't do that if we've filed a police report. So he sends a letter." I finished, the chill spreading through my chest. "He sends a proof of life letter to make us the protective parents back off. He needs us to believe she's fine and living in Florida so we don't interfere. So we don't call the cops, so that when Friday comes he can march her into a bank, get her signature, and disappear." And my daughter, my brave, terrified daughter, knew his plan. She couldn't stop him, but she could warn us. I looked at the thick, leather-bound trust. It wasn't just a financial document anymore. It was a motive. "He's not just controlling her, Annette," I said, my voice hard as the steel vault door. "He's getting ready to steal her entire future, and he thinks we're just two old fools who won't stand in his way." I packed the leather portfolio back into the metal box. I locked it. We walked out of the vault past Jim Mason, who nodded silently. We didn't say a word. The drive home was different from the drive there. The heavy, anxious silence was gone. It had been replaced by something else. A cold, hard certainty. The certainty of a physics equation. We now understood the forces at play. We knew the exact weight of the load, and we knew the precise point of failure. We were no longer two grieving parents. We were a team, an engineer and a nurse, a builder and a healer, and we had a job to do. We got home. Annette went straight to the kitchen to put on a pot of coffee. Not because she was tired, but because she needed her hands to be busy. I went straight to my study. It's a small room lined with my old textbooks, blueprints, and structural manuals. It's where I worked for 45 years. It's a room built on logic and facts. I sat at my heavy oak desk. I looked at the phone. There was only one person to call. This was no longer a job for a cop like Malik. This was a job for a different kind of weapon. I dialed the number for the law firm downtown. A crisp voice answered. "Rowe and Associates." "Ms. Cynthia Rowe, please," I said. "This is Augustus Turner." I was put on hold for less than 10 seconds. Cynthia's voice came on the line. "She is all business, sharp as a diamond, and tougher than any steel I've ever worked with. Her father was a contractor. She understands what it means to build and what it means to protect." "Gus," she said. Her voice was warm, but it had an edge. "It's been too long. Is this a social call, or is the wind blowing?" "The wind is blowing, Cynthia," I said. I got straight to the point. I didn't tell her about the letter. I didn't tell her about the stamp. She didn't need the emotion. She needed the data. "I need you to pull the file for the Maya Turner Irrevocable Trust," I said. "I need you to review the exact wording, specifically Clause 11B. There was a short pause on the line. I could hear the faint click-clack of her keyboard. Then she said one word, and I could almost hear her smile. "Ah," she said. "Clause 11B, the bad son-in-law clause." "That's the one," I said. "You're telling me it's happening?" she asked. "I'm telling you." I said that I have reason to believe the sole beneficiary is currently under undue influence, and that an attempt to drain the trust is imminent. The 30th birthday is this Friday. 5 days, she said. The smile was gone. Her voice was all steel again. "You were right to build it in. Upon receipt of a written and notarized affidavit from the trustee Augustus Turner citing credible belief of coercion or undue influence, the trust will be immediately and unilaterally frozen for a period of 90 days to allow for a full investigation." "Gus, you built your own emergency brake." "An emergency brake," I repeated, a small grim smile touching my lips. "Yes, that's exactly what it is. I need you to prepare the affidavit, Cynthia. I'll be there tomorrow morning to sign it. I'll have it waiting, Gus, she said. And I'll start drafting the preliminary injunctions just in case he's already made a move we don't know about. I hung up, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt a solid piece of ground beneath my feet. Cynthia Rowe. She wasn't just any lawyer. I had sought her out specifically. Her father, Big Ben Rowe, was a contractor, one of the few black contractors in Atlanta back in the 70s who built a business that lasted. She grew up just like Maya, watching her father build things from scratch. But Cynthia didn't go into construction. She went to law school. She went to protect the builders. She understood in her bones what it meant to be a black man in Georgia building a legacy. She understood that people like Derek Hayes, entitled slick white-collar predators, would always see men like me as dinosaurs and our assets as something to be taken. I remembered the day we sat in her conference room 3.5 years ago, just after Maya announced her engagement. I was explaining my fears. I told her I didn't want to control Maya. I wanted to protect her. Cynthia was the one who had tapped her pen on the desk. Gus, she'd said, we can't stop her from marrying him, but we can build a firewall. We write a clause that gives you, the trustee, the power to temporarily shut the whole thing down. We don't need a judge. We don't need her permission. That's the key. If he's truly controlling her, we can't rely on her to ask for help. And so we built Clause 11B, a weapon hidden in plain sight, buried deep in 40 pages of legalese. It states that my signature on a my-sworn statement of credible belief is all that is required. It doesn't need proof yet. It just needs my word. The moment I sign that paper, the trust becomes a steel box that not even the president could open. No transfers, no withdrawals, nothing, for 90 days. Cynthia called it an emergency brake. I called it a deadbolt that I was now finally about to use. Derek Hayes thought he was 5 days from a multi-million-dollar payday. He had no idea he was 5 days from hitting a brick wall. I hung up the phone with Cynthia, the definitive click of the call ending feeling like the sound of a heavy bolt sliding into place. I had my emergency brake. I had my legal weapon. For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe. We had a plan. We had a defense. Then, as I was explaining the details of Clause 11B to Annette, my phone buzzed on the desk. The screen lit up. Malik Brown. My stomach tightened. Malik wouldn't call back this soon unless he'd found something big. I put it on speaker. Gus, he said. His voice was no longer just serious. It was hard. It was the voice of the detective he used to be, the one who shows up at your door at 3 a.m. You and Annette sitting down. We're sitting, Malik, I said. What did you find? I dug into Derek Hayes, Malik said, and I did it quiet. I called in a favor with a guy I know in the financial crimes unit. I asked him to run a check off the books, just to see if there was any smoke. I waited. Gus, Malik said, it's not smoke, it's a damn inferno. Your son-in-law, he's not just broke. What do you mean? Annette asked, her voice trembling. I mean, broke is what happens when you lose at the casino. This is different. This is criminal. The guy didn't just make bad investments, Gus. He was the bad investment. He's been running a shell game. I gripped the edge of my desk. Explain, Malik. He's been lying to his clients. He took their money for his investment fund, but the fund didn't exist. He was just paying off old investors with new investors' money. A classic Ponzi scheme. The whole thing collapsed about 6 weeks ago. My mind flashed back to the pawned necklace, the cheap notebook paper. So he's desperate, I said. He's past desperate, Gus. He's cornered. He didn't just steal from his clients. He stole from the wrong clients, people with connections, people who don't just sue, they collect. But that's not even the worst part. Annette let out a small sob. What could be worse? The feds, Malik said, his voice dropping. The Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, they've been building a case against him for 6 months. My buddy in the unit, he said the case is sealed, but it's big. We're not talking about the $100,000 he tried to get from you. We're talking $2 million, at least. That's what they can prove. $2 million. I felt dizzy. The sheer scale of his greed, his deception. He's a federal fugitive, Gus. Malik said, his voice cutting through my shock. He's not just hiding from us. He's hiding from the U.S. government. There's a sealed indictment waiting for him. The moment he pops his head up, the moment he uses his real name on a bank account or a lease, they'll have him. He's a ghost, and he's got Maya with him. The pieces slammed together with the force of a car crash. This was no longer a domestic dispute. This wasn't a family drama. My daughter was being held captive by a wanted federal criminal. "The trust fund," I whispered. Annette looked at me, her eyes wide with terror. "Gus," Malik asked, "what trust fund? Her 30th birthday is this Friday." I said, my voice barely audible. "He needs her signature to get her money, her clean money. He's not just trying to get rich. He's trying to get a getaway fund. He needs her money to run to disappear to escape the country before they indict him." The kitchen was silent. The only sound was Annette's ragged breathing. The game had changed. The stakes had just escalated from money to freedom, from coercion to a potential federal kidnapping charge. Derek Hayes wasn't just a bad son-in-law. He was a cornered animal. And cornered animals, they are the most dangerous of all. He would do anything to get that money on Friday. And my daughter, my Maya, was the only thing standing in his way. I hung up with Malik. The line went dead. Annette and I just stared at each other. The walls of my study, usually a place of comfort and logic, suddenly felt like they were closing in. The blueprints on the wall, diagrams of steel and concrete, blurred before my eyes. They were symbols of a world that made sense, a world of rules. We weren't in that world anymore. This wasn't a family squabble. This wasn't a bad marriage. This wasn't a son-in-law I didn't like. "He's a criminal," I said, the words feeling heavy and wrong in my mouth. "Annette, he's a federal fugitive. This is a criminal case." Annette's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a sob. "Oh my God, Gus, Maya, she's not just with a man who's broke. She's a hostage." Her word hostage hung in the air, cold and sharp as a piece of broken glass. Everything that had happened, the stamp, the pawned necklace, the Miami lie, it all snapped into a new, terrifying focus. This wasn't about a 30-year-old making bad life choices. This was about a $2 million con man who was cornered, desperate, and 5 days from a payday. He wasn't just controlling Maya, he was using her. She was his shield. She was his key. She was his leverage. And she was in the middle, trapped between a federal indictment and a desperate man who would do anything to escape. The danger level, which I had thought was high, just escalated to a place I had never imagined. This was no longer about saving my daughter's money. This was about saving her life. I had just put the phone down from Malik. The weight of the words "federal fugitive" was crushing the air in the room. Annette was staring at the wall, her face pale, her hands twisting in her lap. My daughter was a hostage, a key, a shield for a $2 million con man. My mind was spinning, trying to calculate the new tolerances, the new stresses on our family's foundation. And then my phone rang again. It wasn't Malik, it wasn't Cynthia, it was an unknown number. A no-caller ID display. Annette and I looked at the phone as if it were a snake. It buzzed on the oak desk, loud and obscene in the quiet, terrified room. We both knew with absolute certainty who it was. The parasite, the con man, the man who was holding our daughter. My first instinct was to ignore it. My second was to pick it up and roar into it, to threaten him with the federal agents that were already on his tail. But then I looked at Annette. I saw the raw fear in her eyes. Maya. He had Maya. I was not an angry father. I was an engineer. This was not a fight. This was a negotiation. This was a structural test. I had to see how much weight he would put on the bridge before it broke. I pressed the speaker button. My hand was steady. I let it ring one more time. Then I answered. "Hello," I said. My voice was calm, neutral, the voice of a man answering a wrong number. There was a half-second of static, and then a voice that was pure oil, slick smooth and designed to cover up the filth beneath it. "Gus Bovo, it's Derek. How are you?" He sounded cheerful, happy, like a long-lost son calling for Sunday dinner. The sheer bald-faced audacity of it almost took my breath away. He was a federal fugitive holding my daughter hostage, and he was calling me Gus. "Derek," I said. My voice was level. "It's been a long time." Annette had her hand pressed so hard against her mouth I was afraid she might break something. I know, and I am so sorry about that, Gus," he said, the fake sincerity dripping from every word. "It's been crazy. Just crazy. But listen, I hope you got the letter from Maya. We're so excited. I looked at the cheap lined paper still sitting on my desk. I looked at the upside-down stamp. "We got it," I said. "Florida. You say you're in Florida." "Yes, Miami. It's incredible." He laughed, and it was a real laugh. This man was so deep in his own con he was enjoying the performance. The sun, the water. It's a new start for us, Gus. A real new start. She's like a new person. She's so happy. He paused, waiting for me to say something, to congratulate him. I just waited. She misses you guys, of course," he added, the cheerfulness faltering for just a split second. "We both do." "Is that why you're calling Derek?" I asked. "To tell us how happy she is." Yes, that of course," he said, recovering instantly. "And also, just to clear the air and, well, there's a little business matter." And there it was, the pivot, the real reason for the call. My heart was pounding, but my voice was cold. "Business," I said. "What business could we possibly have, Derek?" There was another oily chuckle on the line. "Business," he said, as if it were a dirty word he was making light of. "Well, Gus, Maya's big 3-0 is coming up. This Friday, can you believe it? Our little girl 30, he said. Our little girl." The rage was so cold and so sudden I almost dropped the phone. "I'm aware of her birthday, Derek," I said. Right. Of course." "Well, you know what that means, the trust fund. The big payday." He laughed again. "Listen, we found the perfect house down here in Miami. A dream home for us to start our family. And we'd love to use that trust money as the down payment. But as you know, you're the trustee. We need your signature to release the funds. It's just a formality, of course." "A formality," I repeated. The man was a federal fugitive trying to steal his wife's inheritance to escape the country, and he was calling it a formality. "Exactly," he said, sensing no resistance. "So I was hoping I can just email you the forms, you can sign them, scan them back, and we can have the money wired to our new Florida account by Friday. Simple." He wanted a wire transfer. He wanted to do this from the shadows, from the Roach Motel in Atlanta he was probably hiding in. He wanted to get the money and run. This was the moment, the pivot point. I took a breath. I looked at Annette. She was watching me, her eyes pleading. "Set the trap, Gus. Set the trap." "Well," I said, letting out a long, slow sigh. I made myself sound like a tired old man confused by paperwork. Derek, I was afraid you were going to ask that. It's just not that simple anymore." "What?" His voice lost its cheer. It was sharp now. "What do you mean, not simple? It's a signature. You just signed the paper." I know, I said, rubbing my forehead. "But I was at the bank just this morning, Derek, checking on things, and Mr. Mason, the manager, he told me about all these new rules. It's a real hassle." "Rules? What rules?" This was it. I used the knowledge Malik had given me. This man was being watched by the feds. He was paranoid about banks and regulations. I would use his own fear against him. "Oh, I said, waving my hand as if he were in the room. "All this new federal stuff. Anti-money laundering laws. The Patriot Act. Something about know your customer, because it's such a large sum and it's the final disbursement. They can't just wire it anymore. They said it's a new policy as of the 1st of the month." I was lying. But it was a structural lie. It was built on a foundation of truth. He, of all people, would be afraid to argue against federal banking regulations. There was a long, cold silence on the other end of the line. He was calculating. He was weighing his need for the money against the risk. "So, what?" He finally said, his voice tight. "What do they want?" It's just a formality," I said, throwing his own words back at him. "They just require everyone to be present, in person, at the main branch. They need to see all of our IDs at the same time." "What?" he hissed. "In person, in Atlanta, that's ridiculous. We're in Florida." "I know," I said, matching his frustration. "I told them that I said my daughter's in Miami, but Mason said his hands are tied. Rules are rules, Gus. He said the bank's compliance department requires it. He needs the beneficiary, that's Maya, and the trustee, that's me, in the same room to sign the final transfer papers. He even said, and this is silly, He said it would be best practice if you as her husband were there too, for transparency. I held my breath. I had laid the bait. A secure room, a fixed time, and I had dangled the ultimate prize. Another long silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in his desperate criminal mind. He needed that money. He couldn't get it without Maya, and he couldn't get it without me. This is a nightmare, he muttered. A logistical nightmare. I know, son, I said, my voice full of fake sympathy. But it is what it is. The money's just sitting there. We just have to jump through their hoops. He was quiet for another 10 seconds. Then he sighed a sound of pure exasperation. Fine, we'll fly in. We'll come to Atlanta. We can't lose that house. Oh, that's wonderful, I said. Maya must be so excited. Yeah, he said, all business now. So when it has to be Friday, right? Her birthday. That's right, I said. Friday, 10 a.m., the main branch downtown. Mason said he'd reserve the conference room for us. We can have it all done in 30 minutes. Friday, he repeated. 10 a.m. Send me the address. We'll be there. And Gus, don't tell anyone. We want to surprise some old friends. Just keep it between us. Of course, son, I said. Our little secret. He hung up without saying goodbye. I let my hand fall from the phone. I looked at Annette. Her face was a mask of terror and something else. Pride. He took it, I whispered. He took the bait. The game was on. The trap was set. Friday, 10 a.m. He thought he was walking into a bank. He had no idea he was walking into my building, and I had designed it specifically for him. The line went dead silent. But it wasn't a disconnected silence. It was the sound of a desperate mind calculating, weighing, and scrambling. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. He was a federal fugitive. Walking into a major bank branch in downtown Atlanta, the very city he was hiding in, was the stupidest, most high-risk thing he could possibly do. The feds could be watching every bank, but the money, the multi-million-dollar clean money, his only ticket out of the country, his only escape from a federal prison. He was a cornered animal, and I was holding the only key to his cage. He had to take the risk. He let out a long, hissing sigh. I could picture him pacing, running his soft hands through his slick hair. This is a nightmare, he muttered almost to himself. A logistical nightmare. Are you sure there's no other way? No video call, no notarized form from here. I asked him, son, I said, my voice dripping with false sympathy. I pushed hard, but he just kept shaking his head. Federal compliance, Gus, my hands are tied. He said it's a new policy. Another beat of silence. The final calculation. Fine, he snapped the word sharp and angry. Fine, we'll fly in. We'll be there. We can't lose that house over some stupid rule. He's still holding on to the lie, I thought. Good. Arrogance makes you sloppy. It has to be Friday, right? He demanded, his voice all business now. Her birthday. That's right, I said. Friday, 10 a.m., the main branch downtown. Mason said he'd reserve the conference room for us. We can have it all done in 30 minutes. Friday. He repeated the words like chips of ice. 10 a.m. Send me the address. We'll be there. He had taken the bait, the hook, the line, and the sinker. He hung up. He didn't slam the phone down. He just gently pressed the end button as if he were handling a delicate piece of equipment. The no-caller ID display vanished, replaced by my home screen. I let my hand fall from the phone. I looked up at my wife. Annette was pale. She was holding on to the back of a kitchen chair, her knuckles white. She looked like she might collapse. Gus, she whispered, her voice a raw nerve. Friday, that's only 4 days. What have you done? What if he senses it's a trap? Gus, he's a federal criminal. He's desperate. He'll be dangerous. He might have a gun. He has our baby girl. Her voice broke on the last word. I stood up from my desk. I walked over to her. I didn't hug her, not yet. I just put my two steady 68-year-old hands on her shoulders. I made her look me in the eye. He won't sense anything, I said. My voice was quiet. It was cold. It was the voice I used on a construction site when a support beam was out of alignment. He's arrogant, I said. He thinks he's the smartest man in the world. He thinks I'm a relic, a stupid old black man he can push around. He's so focused on the money he can't see the structure. He thinks he set this meeting. He thinks he is in control. But he's not, Annette whispered, searching my eyes. No, I said, he's not. I let go of her shoulders and walked to the window of my study. I looked out at the solid, familiar shape of my neighbor's house. I looked at the power lines, the street, the sidewalk. A world of structures, a world of rules. For 45 years, Annette, I said, my back to her, I've built things. I've designed foundations to hold up skyscrapers. I've built bridges to carry thousands of people safely over rivers. I've spent my entire life building structures to protect families, to keep them safe from gravity, from wind, from chaos. I turned back to her. The fear in her eyes was still there, but it was being replaced by the look she used to get in the emergency room. A focused professional calm. Now, I said, I am going to build one more thing. I am going to build a trap. He thinks he's walking into a bank. He thinks he's walking into a simple meeting. He has no idea. He is walking onto my construction site. I am going to use his greed as the concrete. I am going to use his arrogance as the steel. I am going to use his desperation as the blueprint. I am going to build a structure so perfect, so strong, that he will walk into it himself. And when he's inside, I'm going to pull all the supports out at once. I picked up my phone. I had 4 days. The planning phase was over. It was time to build. The next 4 days were the most focused of my life. I was no longer a husband. I was no longer a father. I was a structural engineer, and this was the most important project I had ever designed. My study became my side office. Annette, my rock, became my project manager. She handled the outside world, making excuses for why we weren't answering social calls, keeping our lives looking perfectly normal, while I focused on the blueprints of our trap. I took out a fresh yellow legal pad, the same kind I'd used for 45 years. I wrote Project Chimera at the top. Because that's what Derek was, a monster made of different parts. Greed, arrogance, and desperation. Then I listed the phases of construction. Phase 1, the foundation. This was the legal groundwork. It had to be unshakable. I would go to Cynthia Rowe's office first thing Tuesday morning. I would sign the affidavit executing Clause 11B. The trust would be frozen before Derek even stepped off the plane. He would be walking into a vault that was already sealed. Phase 2, the perimeter. This was security. I needed eyes. I needed to know what I was walking into. This was Malik's job. I would have him run a check on Derek the moment he landed at Hartsfield-Jackson. I wanted to know if he was traveling alone, if he was visibly armed, what name he was traveling under. I needed intel. Phase 3, the environment. This was the trap room itself. The bank conference room. I couldn't have any unknowns. I would meet with Jim Mason at the bank on Wednesday. I needed to see the room. I needed to know the layout, the exits, the sight lines. I needed to control the space. Phase 4, the trigger. This was the most critical piece. I had his lies. I had Malik's intel. But I wanted one final, undeniable piece of evidence. I needed to get him to threaten me or threaten Maya in a way that I could prove. I needed to bait him one last time to get his arrogance on the record. I laid out the plan for Annette, each step, each contingency. "Gus," she said, her voice steady, "this is meticulous." "It has to be," I said, drawing a schematic of the bank's conference room from memory. "When you're building a demolition, you can't just light a fuse and run. You have to place the charges, one by one, in exactly the right spot." "So, when he presses the button," she whispered. "He doesn't press the button," I said, looking up from my pad. "He is the button. The whole building is designed to collapse on top of him using his own weight." I had 4 days to build my trap, and I would not miss a single detail. Tuesday morning, 8:50 a.m. I was in downtown Atlanta. I walked into the glass and steel lobby of Cynthia Rowe's law firm. It was the opposite of my study, all modern art and cool gray marble. It felt like her expensive precise and not a single thing out of place. I was shown straight into her corner office. She was standing by the window looking down at the city, a manila folder in her hand. She didn't turn around. "Gus," she said, The affidavit is on the desk. All you have to do is sign. I walked to her desk. It was a massive piece of polished mahogany. On it sat a single 2-page document. I read it. The legalese was dense, but the core was simple. It stated that I, Augustus Turner, trustee, held a credible belief that the beneficiary Maya Turner Hayes was acting under undue influence and coercion. It was the exact legal key I had designed. Cynthia turned around. She was wearing a sharp navy blue suit. "Are you sure, Gus? Once you sign this, the trust is frozen. Period. If you're wrong, if she's just been a bad daughter, this will burn the bridge." I picked up the heavy pen she had left there. My hand was as steady as it had ever been on a blueprint. "He's a federal fugitive, Cynthia. SEC investigation. $2 million. He's not a bad son-in-law. He's a con man who's holding my daughter hostage." Her eyes, which had been concerned, sharpened into focus. "SEC, you didn't tell me that yesterday." "I didn't know yesterday. I found out last night. He's using her to get getaway money." Cynthia's face became a mask of cold professional fury. "Well," she said, "that changes the architecture of this whole thing, doesn't it? This isn't a trust dispute. It's a criminal extraction." I signed my name, not a shaky scrawl, a clear, strong engineer's signature. I pushed the paper across the desk. Phase 1 is complete. The box is sealed. He just doesn't know it yet. Cynthia took the affidavit, her eyes scanning my signature. "Good. I'll file this electronically right now. As of 9:03 a.m., that trust is a brick of steel. He can't touch it. I'll also have an associate of mine, one who specializes in this, on standby on Friday, just in case." I nodded. "Good. I have one more call to make." I walked out of her building and got into my car. I didn't drive away. I sat in the parking garage and dialed Malik. He picked up on the first ring. "Gus." "It's on," I said. "Friday, 10 a.m., the main bank branch downtown." 10 a.m., he repeated. "That's a public time. He's arrogant." "He's desperate," I corrected. "Now listen to me, Malik. This is the security plan. I don't want you inside. I don't want him to see a single face he doesn't recognize. He'll bolt. So what do you need?" "I need you outside, across the street, in an unmarked car. I'll text you when we're walking in, and I'll text you one other time. The signal is 11B. 11B, he repeated, like the trust clause. "When you get that text, Malik, that's the signal. It means the trap is sprung. It means I have what I need. You call your buddies, you call the feds, you call whoever you need to call, but you don't move until you get that text. That's the trigger." "All right, Gus. I'm the perimeter. What about the package? What about Maya?" "He'll have her with him. He has to. She's his key." "Understood. One more thing. I'll have a friend at Hartsfield running facial recognition. The moment he steps off that plane, I'll know. I'll know what he's wearing if he's alone, and if he looks like he's carrying." "Good," I said, a wave of relief washing over me. "I need to know what's walking into my building." "I'll be there, Gus," Malik said, his voice a low growl. "And I'll bring a few old friends. We'll be invisible, but we'll be close." I hung up. I sat in my car for a full minute. Phase 1 legal was complete. The foundation was set. Phase 2 security was in place. The perimeter was established. Now, it was time to inspect the room itself. Wednesday, 2 days to go. I had the legal foundation set. I had the security perimeter locked down. Now I had to prepare the room itself. Phase 3. I didn't go to the bank. I called Jim Mason's direct line. "Jim," I said, my voice all business. "Gus Turner, I need a favor." "Anything, Gus. You know that." "What's going on? Is everything okay with that trust?" "It's a delicate situation, Jim," I said, choosing my words with engineering precision. "We are proceeding with the final disbursement on Friday at 10 a.m., as I mentioned. But there are some sensitive family dynamics at play. I need to ensure this transaction is handled with absolute security and discretion." "Of course," he said, his managerial voice kicking in. "I've already reserved the main conference room for you. It's the most secure one we have, solid walls, solid door." "Good," I said. "That's good. Now I need something else, and this is critical. Name it. My son-in-law, Derek Hayes, will be joining us. Let's just say he's an aggressive negotiator. I need to make one final confirmation call with him tomorrow just to verify the terms before we all meet." "Okay," Mason said, sounding confused. For the bank's protection, I said, and for mine. I need that call recorded, legally. I need it on a recorded line logged by the bank's official system. Can you do that? Record a call. Jim sounded hesitant. Gus, that's highly irregular. We have compliance rules. That's exactly why I'm asking. I cut in, my voice firm. This is about compliance, Jim. This is a multi-million-dollar transfer. I've already filed a legal affidavit with my lawyer this morning citing undue influence. I am worried he will try to contest the terms or claim he wasn't properly informed. I want a bank record of that call for account security and transaction verification purposes. Can you set up a monitored three-way call for me tomorrow for the bank's protection? I had used the magic words: account security, bank's protection, undue influence. Mason was silent for a beat. He was no fool. He was a bank manager. He understood liability. I see, he said, his voice now very serious. Given the affidavit and the sum involved, yes, I can authorize that. It's the right move to protect all parties. What time tomorrow? 10 a.m., I said, exactly 24 hours before the meeting. All right, Gus, you call my direct line. I'll patch him in on a recorded conference bridge. You'll hear the official "this call is being recorded" notification. That will make it completely legal. I'll have the digital file ready for you by Friday morning. Thank you, Jim, I said. You're a good man. Just protecting my clients, Gus, and my bank. I hung up. Phase 3 was complete. The room was set. Now all I needed was the final trigger. Thursday morning, 10 a.m., exactly 24 hours before the meeting, I was in my study. The house was silent. Annette was in the kitchen pretending to read the paper, but I knew she was listening, her whole body coiled like a spring. This was it. Phase 4, the final crucial piece of the structure. I had the legal foundation set with Cynthia. The trust was frozen. I had the security perimeter set with Malik. He and his men would be invisible waiting. I had the environment set with Jim Mason. I knew the room. Now I needed the trigger. I needed Derek's own arrogance, his own voice captured and logged by the bank's official system. I dialed Jim Mason's direct line. Jim, it's Gus. It's 10 o'clock. I'm ready, Gus. Mason's voice came back low and professional. The conference bridge is open. I've got his number. I'm dialing him now. Remember, the line is hot. You'll hear the notification. I'll be on mute, but I'll be here. Good luck. I heard a click. Then a sterile, robotic female voice filled the line. This call is now being recorded for quality assurance and security purposes. Another click. The line connected. Hello? Derek's voice was sharp, impatient. He sounded like a man who hated being bothered. Derek, I said, and I was proud of how calm and old my voice sounded. It's Gus Turner. I'm just calling to confirm everything for tomorrow at 10. I heard him sigh, a gust of pure annoyance. Gus, what is it now? I told you we'll be there. 10 a.m. Just have the papers ready. We're on a very tight schedule. I know, son, I know, I said, and I put a little tremor in my voice. It's this bank. And my lawyer, Ms. Rowe, she's very meticulous. Meticulous. What does that mean? He snapped. It's just... She brought up that undue influence clause again. I said, faking confusion. You know, just legal junk. And for the bank's records for their compliance, she's insisting I get, verbal confirmation from you. Confirmation of what? That you understand the terms, and that Maya is signing this of her own free will. It's just a formality, you understand. Just checking a box so Ms. Rowe and the bank are covered. There was a dead cold silence on the line. The air crackled. I had poked him. Undue influence, he finally said. His voice had dropped. The fake cheerfulness was gone. It was flat and dangerous. What the hell are you implying, Gus? Are you trying to cause trouble after I went through all this effort to fly us in? No, I said, faking a panic. No, not at all. I'm just reading from the script, son. The bank just needs to know the transfer is legitimate. So can you just, confirm that Maya is happy that she's willing to sign? He laughed. It was not a nice sound. It was sharp and brittle like breaking glass. Happy? Of course she's happy. She's getting her money. We are getting our dream house. Listen, old man, let's you and I be crystal clear so there are no misunderstandings. Tomorrow. I held my breath. You, your lawyer, and that idiot bank manager. You have one job. Have the papers ready. Have the wire transfer queued up. Everything needs to go smoothly. He let the words hang in the air, a direct order, and then he delivered the payload, the trigger. Maya. She's been under a lot of stress lately, he said, his voice becoming sickeningly soft, like a doctor delivering bad news. She's very fragile. It would be a real shame if something disrupted her emotional state. A real shame if she got upset because of some last-minute problem or some old man causing trouble. Do you understand what I'm saying, Gus? Got him. It was perfect. A precise, veiled threat against her well-being, her mental and emotional safety if he didn't get his money. I let out a shaky breath. Yes, I understand. You're saying, I just need to make sure the money is ready. That's exactly what I'm saying, he said, his arrogant, impatient tone returning. Be smart, Gus. Don't be a hero. 10 a.m., no surprises. He hung up. The line went dead. Jim Mason came back on. Gus, I have the recording. It's saved to the bank's server. It's time-stamped and secure. His voice was shaky. Thank you, Jim, I said, my voice now perfectly steady. I'll see you tomorrow. I hung up the phone. I had just recorded a direct threat. He had tied her safety to my compliance. That wasn't influence. That was extortion. I had the trigger. The trap was now fully armed. Friday, 9:50 a.m. We were in place. The main conference room at the downtown branch was exactly what I had expected. Solid oak, no windows to the outside. A thick, soundproofed glass wall looked out onto the main banking floor, but a set of heavy blinds had been drawn, sealing us in. It was a room designed for million-dollar deals, for privacy, for security. Today it was my construction site. It was the trap box. I sat at the head of the heavy, polished table. It was so solid I could have parked a truck on it. I felt the grain of the wood under my palms. My hands were steady. I was not a father waiting for his daughter. I was an engineer triple-checking the load calculations before the test. To my right sat Annette. She was the picture of calm. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap, her back perfectly straight. But I knew my wife. She was in what she called her ER triage mode. All external emotion was shut down. She was a professional assessing a trauma. Her gaze was fixed on the solid oak door. To my left sat Ms. Cynthia Rowe. She was our legal artillery. She had one single thin manila file in front of her. Inside it, I knew, was the notarized affidavit already filed. The document that made this whole meeting a performance. She was slowly stirring a cup of coffee the bank had provided. She looked almost bored, like this was her third most important meeting of the day. That's when Cynthia is at her most dangerous. At the far end of the table sat Jim Mason, the bank manager. He was the only one who looked nervous. He was on his own turf, but this wasn't his game. He kept adjusting his tie. He had a file in front of him, too. It contained the printout from the trust account showing its frozen status. And more importantly, it contained a digital recorder with yesterday's audio file. He was our witness. The air in the room was thick. It was suffocating. The only sound was the faint hiss of the air conditioning vent and the heavy tick, tick, tick of the large corporate clock on the wall. Every piece was in place. Phase 1. The legal foundation. Cynthia had frozen the trust. The money was already untouchable. Phase 2. The security perimeter. Malik was across the street in an unmarked car monitoring the entrance, waiting for my signal. Phase 3. The environment. This room. Solid, secure, and sealed. Phase 4. The trigger. The audio file of Derek's threat sitting on the table in Jim Mason's recorder. We were not here to negotiate. We were not here to sign papers. We were here for an extraction. We were here to document a crime. The clock on the wall ticked over to 9:59. Annette's hands clenched just once. Cynthia took a slow sip of her coffee. Jim Mason wiped his palms on his trousers. I just watched the door. The clock ticked. 10 o'clock, and right on cue, as if he owned the building, we heard them. Footsteps. Hard-soled, expensive shoes clicking on the marble floor outside. They stopped right outside our door. There was a pause. Then the heavy brass handle began to turn. The heavy brass handle turned slowly, then decisively. The door swung open with a pneumatic hiss breaking the tomb-like silence of the room. And there he was, Derek Hayes. He stepped in first. He was wearing an Italian suit, a beautiful charcoal gray wool that probably cost more than my first car. The facade was perfect. But the man inside it was a wreck. He wasn't the slick, confident predator I remembered from the steakhouse. That man was gone. This man was thin, gaunt. His expensive shirt collar seemed too large for his neck. His eyes, I'll never forget his eyes. They weren't the eyes of a wolf. They were the eyes of a cornered rat. They darted everywhere. In one fraction of a second, I, the engineer, logged his movements. His gaze didn't go to me. It didn't go to Annette. It went to the corners of the room. It went to Jim Mason. It went to Cynthia Rowe. It was a predator's scan. He was checking for threats. He was so deep in his paranoia, so hunted by the feds and the men he'd scammed, he was looking for a trap everywhere. Except in the two old people he thought he was about to rob. He saw two old grieving parents, a sharp lawyer, a nervous bank manager. He saw exactly what I wanted him to see. He saw a room full of marks. His shoulders relaxed just a fraction. He had made his calculation. He was safe. And then he pulled her in. My breath caught in my throat. Maya. It was her, but it wasn't. I almost didn't recognize my own daughter. The girl I had raised, the vibrant, laughing engineer who had graduated from Georgia Tech, she was gone. In her place was this ghost, this hollow-eyed stranger. She must have lost 30 pounds. Her skin was a pale, sickly gray. Her beautiful curly hair was lank and lifeless, pulled back in a severe, uncared-for knot. She was wearing a turtleneck, a heavy, dark gray wool turtleneck. My engineer's mind flagged the anomaly immediately. It was June, in Atlanta. It was 85 degrees outside, thick and humid as a swamp, and she was wearing a wool turtleneck. It was a uniform. It was a costume designed to hide. Derek still had his hand on her. He wasn't holding her hand. He wasn't guiding her. He was gripping her. His fingers were clamped around her left elbow like a prison guard handling a difficult inmate. He propelled her forward into the room, pushing her toward a chair. And as he pushed her, the cuff of her sweater, which was too large for her thin frame, rode up. Just an inch, just for a second, but we saw it. Annette let out a small, strangled gasp. She disguised it as a cough, her hand flying to her chest. But I saw it clearly. Wrapped around my daughter's delicate wrist, just above her hand, was a bruise. It wasn't a new bruise, a red, angry mark. It was old, a sickening yellowish purple, the color of rot. It wasn't a smudge. It was the distinct, perfect, undeniable shape of fingers, his fingers, from where he had grabbed her, squeezed her, hurt her. A rage so cold, so pure, and so absolute washed through me that the room went slightly out of focus. It wasn't the hot rage of a father. It was the cold, structural rage of an engineer who has just found a critical, load-bearing beam deliberately sawed halfway through by a vandal. This thing had put his hands on my daughter. And then the worst part. Maya. She didn't look at us. She walked past her mother, who was sitting 5 feet away, and didn't turn her head. She shuffled past me, her father, and didn't lift her eyes. Her eyes were dead. They were hollow. There was no light in them. No recognition, no fear, no anything. She was staring at a single fixed point on the polished wood of the table in front of her. She was a person who had been so terrorized, so broken down, that she had simply left. She had retreated to a place deep inside herself where he couldn't get to her. She was a living hostage, her soul held captive long after her body had surrendered. This was the fragile state Derek had threatened me with on the phone. This was the suey soup he had warned me about. He hadn't just been threatening her. He had been describing her. He had broken her. He had broken my child. He pushed her into a chair and she sat, lifeless, a puppet with its strings cut. My resolve, which had been steel, hardened into something new. It hardened into diamond, unbreakable, unforgiving. This was no longer a legal extraction. This was no longer about money. This was a demolition. And this man, this rat in an Italian suit, would not be walking out of this room. Derek let go of Maya's elbow, giving her a small, firm push into the chair opposite me. She sat, her hands vanishing into her lap. She was a ghost, a prop. And with his prop in place, Derek's entire demeanor changed. The anxious hunted rat was gone, replaced by the slick, arrogant con man. He was on stage. He owned this room. He smiled a wide, predatory smile that didn't touch his dead eyes. "All right," he announced, clapping his soft hands together once. The sound was like a gunshot in the silent room. "Let's get this done." He didn't sit. He paced to the head of the table, my seat, and stood there looking down at us. He was asserting his dominance, claiming my spot. He unbuttoned his Italian suit jacket, slid his hands into his pockets, and looked around the table, his gaze dripping with contempt. "My plane leaves at 3 people, he said, checking his $5,000 watch. "And I have no intention of missing it, so I don't have time for a big tearful family reunion." He directed his gaze at Jim Mason. "You, Mason, the manager. You have the papers, the transfer forms." Jim Mason, a man who managed a $20 million branch, flinched. He was being spoken to like a clerk. He cleared his throat, playing his part. "Yes, Mr. Hayes. We have the standard trust disbursement forms right here. If you'll just—" "No!" Derek cut him off. He didn't just interrupt. He dismissed him. "No, not your forms. My forms." He reached into his slim leather briefcase and pulled out a small stack of papers. He tossed them onto the center of the polished table. They slid across the wood and stopped right in front of me. "We're not doing a standard disbursement," he sneered, as if the very idea was quaint. "We are doing a direct same-day wire transfer. The account information is all there. Swift code, routing, everything. It's a foreign investment account for our new house." I didn't need to look at the papers. I knew the account wasn't in Miami. It was in the Caymans, or Switzerland, or some other place the SEC couldn't touch. "It's very simple," Derek continued, his voice slick with condescension. "Maya signs as the beneficiary. You," he pointed a finger at me, "sign as the trustee. And you," he pointed at Mason, "execute the wire. We can be out of here in 10 minutes. He then let his gaze fall on Ms. Cynthia Rowe. He smirked. "And I assume you are the family lawyer. Ms. Rowe, is it? I do hope you're not here to complicate this. This is a simple private family transaction. You're a witness, nothing more. Don't go billing these good people for your time here. It's insulting, really." Cynthia just took a slow, deliberate sip of her coffee, her eyes as cold and flat as a frozen lake. She didn't say a word. His arrogance was a physical thing. It filled the room, pressing down on all of us. He hadn't bothered to even look at Annette. My wife, the mother of the woman he was holding hostage, was invisible to him. She was a piece of furniture. His performance was breathtaking. He was so confident in his control, so certain that we were all just stupid small-time players in his grand federal-level con. Finally, his entire demeanor shifted. He turned to Maya. His voice, which had been sharp and brittle, became a thick, sickly sweet syrup. "Baby," he cooed. He walked over and put his hand on her shoulder. Her shoulder, under the thick wool turtleneck, was so thin I could see the bones. She flinched, a tiny bird-like motion that he instantly covered by squeezing. "Baby, you ready? We just sign this one last thing and we can go. We can go to our new house. Our new life, just like we planned." He was speaking for us, performing for the lawyer, for the banker. "Right, Maya?" he prompted. Maya did not look up. Her eyes remained fixed on the table. But as if a string had been pulled, she gave a small, jerky nod. Once. That was all he needed. That tiny, coerced motion was to him a binding contract. He beamed, turning back to us victorious. "See, she's fine. She's excited. We're all on the same page." He tapped the papers he had thrown in front of me. "So, Gus," he said, his voice returning to its sharp, impatient edge, "the ball is in your court. Let's not make this difficult. Let's not upset Maya. You heard her. She wants this. I want this. It's her birthday. Are you really going to be the one to stand in the way of your daughter's happiness?" He leaned in his cologne, washing over me, a chemical smell of fake confidence. "Your pen," he said, "or mine. I've got a plane to catch and a new life to start." I just looked at him. I looked at the hand on my daughter's shoulder. I looked at the bruise on her wrist. I looked at the hollow, empty shell of the child I had raised. The play was over. His performance was finished. Now it was my turn. Derek stood there leaning in, that chemical smell of his cologne filling my space. His hand was still gripping Maya's shoulder. His other hand was gesturing to the papers to my pen. Well, Gus, we're all waiting. A simple signature. For your daughter's happiness. The room was so quiet I could hear the tiny whir of the digital recorder in front of Jim Mason. I looked down. I saw Derek's manicured soft hand on my daughter's bony shoulder. I saw the yellow-purple bruise the shape of his fingers on her wrist as her hand lay dead in her lap. I saw the hollow, empty eyes of my child, a prisoner in her own body. The cold, structural rage I had felt earlier settled into something different. It became an absolute, pure and simple 0 point. The calculation was complete. The demolition sequence was ready. I did not pick up the pen. Instead, I slowly, deliberately placed my own 2 hands on the table. I interlaced my fingers, my knuckles resting right on top of his pile of fraudulent wire transfer documents. It was a gesture of finality, a wall. Then I looked up. I didn't look at his eyes. I looked through him. And I spoke. The voice that came out was not the shaky, confused old man from yesterday's phone call. It was not the voice of a grieving father. It was the voice of Augustus Turner, the engineer, the man who had run crews of 100 men and built skyscrapers from holes in the ground. It was a voice that did not shake. It was a voice that did not break. It was flat, cold, and heavy as concrete. We won't be signing anything today, Derek. The silence that followed was absolute. Derek froze. His plastic smile twitched. He hadn't processed the words. He tilted his head as if he'd heard a strange noise. What did you just say? He laughed a short, nervous ha. What's wrong, Gus? Your pen out of ink. Here, use mine. He clicked his own expensive pen and tried to offer it. I didn't move. My hands remained laced together, a barricade on top of his papers. I repeated, my voice even lower, even clearer. We are not signing anything. Not these papers, not any papers, not today. The shift in the room was instant. It was a physical change, like a drop in barometric pressure before a hurricane. Derek's smile didn't just fade, it evaporated. His face, which had been a mask of slick confidence, went blank. And then it darkened. Are you insane? He hissed, his voice dropping to a whisper, but a whisper that was more threatening than a shout. What kind of stupid senile game are you playing, old man? His hand on Maya's shoulder, which had been a prop, became a claw. He gripped her, and this time I saw her face tighten, a flicker of pain. I am not playing games, he spat. You heard Maya. She wants this, we want this. Now sign the damn papers. He lunged forward, trying to snatch the papers out from under my hands. But my hands were like stone, they didn't budge. No, I said, locking eyes with him. The old man was gone. The engineer was here. I heard you, Derek. I heard you very clearly, and I heard you yesterday, too. You heard me? Derek scoffed, a look of genuine disbelief on his face. He actually laughed. What did you put a bug in my... Old man, you really have lost it. I knew you were a relic, but I didn't think you were senile. Are you having a stroke? He turned to Maya, his voice full of mock pity. Maya, baby, look at this. Your father's finally cracked. He's trying to ruin your birthday. He's trying to ruin our new life. He gripped her shoulder tighter, his knuckles turning white. Maya, tell him. Tell your father to stop being an idiot and sign the paper. Tell him you want this. Tell him now. Maya flinched. Her hollow eyes squeezed shut. A single tiny sound escaped her lips. She couldn't form the words. She was trapped. And that's when a new voice, cool as ice and sharp as a scalpel, cut through the room. She doesn't have to say anything, Mr. Hayes. It was Ms. Cynthia Rowe. She hadn't moved. She was still sitting, her hands calmly resting by her coffee cup. But she was looking right at Derek. And her gaze was not one of a witness. It was one of a prosecutor. What? Derek snapped, turning his attention to her. Who the hell are you? I told you you're just here to watch. I'm afraid you've been misinformed, Cynthia said. She reached for the thin manila folder in front of her. She didn't open it. She just pushed it, slowly, across the polished wood until it stopped directly in front of him next to my hands. That, she said, her voice devoid of all emotion, is a copy of a legal notice filed with this bank and with the courts as of 9:03 a.m. on Tuesday, 2 days ago. Derek stared at the folder as if it were a bomb. What is that? What are you talking about? That, Cynthia said, is the signed and executed affidavit for Clause 11B of the Maya Turner Irrevocable Trust, the bad son-in-law clause. Derek's face went from red to a pale, sickly white, the color of old paper. What? Clause 11B? Cynthia continued, her voice clear and precise, as if she were dictating a letter. It states that upon the credible belief of coercion or undue influence by the trustee that's Mr. Turner, the trust is, and I quote, immediately and unilaterally frozen for a period of 90 days. As of Tuesday morning, Mr. Hayes, that trust is a brick. There is no money. You can't sign for it. He can't sign for it. Even Maya can't sign for it. This meeting is a formality, but not the one you were expecting. You, he whispered. You can't. He was cornered. The rat was in the trap. And he did the only thing a cornered rat can do. He turned on Maya. Maya! He roared, his voice cracking. He grabbed her arm, yanking her forward. Tell them you're not being coerced. Tell them you want the money. Tell them, damn it. Tell them. He shook her, his fingers digging into her thin shoulders. Maya, tell them now. Maya cringed, a broken, terrified whimper escaping her. It was the sound of a small animal, and it broke my heart. Stop it, Derek, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through his rage like a diamond saw through soft wood. He froze. He turned to me, his face a mask of purple, congested fury. You will not. I said, stop it, I repeated. I slowly unlaced my fingers and pointed one steady finger at him. And take your hands off my daughter. He was so shocked by the command, he actually did it. His hands flew off her shoulders as if she were red hot. I then turned my gaze past him to my daughter. For the first time, her hollow eyes flickered. She looked at me. She saw me. The old man was gone. Her father was here. You don't have to say anything, baby girl, I said, my voice softening just for her. You don't have to speak. You've already said everything you needed to say. I tapped the corner of my eye. The stamp. Her eyes widened. A single perfect tear welled up and fell onto her lap. She understood. I turned my gaze back to Derek. His face was a confusion of rage and dawning horror. He didn't understand. He was a con man. He was always 3 steps ahead. He couldn't comprehend how the old man, the relic, had just outplayed him. You don't get it, do you, Derek? I said, almost pitying him. You thought this was your show. You thought you were in control. He stammered, looking from me to Cynthia. This is illegal. You can't. She's my wife. You're right, I said. This isn't a family matter anymore. It's a legal one. And in legal matters, evidence is everything. I turned my head to the end of the table. Mr. Mason, Jim Mason, who had been sitting like a statue, flinched. Yes, Gus. Phase 4, I said. The trigger, if you please. Trigger what trigger? Derek snarled. Jim Mason reached forward to the small silver digital recorder that had been sitting in front of him. His hand was shaking, but he pressed the play button. A loud electronic click echoed in the room, and then a sterile, robotic female voice filled the air. This call is now being recorded for quality assurance and security purposes. Derek's face went from pale to the color of ash. He stared at the recorder, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound coming out. Then my own voice, shaky and old, came from the machine. I'm just reading from the script, son. The bank just needs to know the transfer is legitimate. So can you just, confirm that Maya is happy that she's willing to sign? And then his own voice, his own arrogant, slick, and dangerous voice filled the room, bouncing off the solid oak walls. Listen, old man, let's you and I be crystal clear. Everything needs to go smoothly. Maya, she's been under a lot of stress lately. She's very fragile. It would be a real shame if something disrupted her emotional state. A real shame if she got upset because of some old man causing trouble. Do you understand what I'm saying, Gus? The recording clicked off. The silence that followed was heavier than any I have ever known. It was the silence of a failed foundation, the silence of a structural collapse. Derek did not move. He was a statue. He was a man who had just listened to his own voice on a bank-recorded line extorting his father-in-law by threatening his fragile wife. The same wife sitting next to him with a bruise on her arm and a turtleneck covering her throat. He finally understood. This was never a meeting. This was his execution. The recording of his own voice threatening his fragile wife hung in the air, echoing in the dead silence. Derek's face, which had been pale as ash, suddenly collapsed. The mask of the con man, the slick broker, the arrogant predator, it didn't just crack, it vaporized. What was left was a raw, primal animal. "You—" His voice wasn't a word. It was a roar, a sound of pure, cornered rat fury. He didn't lunge at me. He didn't lunge at Cynthia. He lunged at the evidence. "You bastard! You recorded me!" He threw himself across the heavy oak table, his $5,000 suit jacket ripping audibly at the shoulder seam. His arms flailed, knocking over coffee cups, scattering Cynthia's papers. He was a man drowning, trying to grab the small silver digital recorder that held his confession. He was trying to smash it, to silence his own words. Jim Mason yelped and fell backward out of his chair. Annette didn't even flinch. Cynthia just watched him, her expression one of utter disdain. And in that single chaotic second, as Derek's entire world collapsed into a desperate, pathetic lunge for a piece of plastic, I calmly slipped my right hand into my pocket. My fingers found the smooth, cool glass of my cell phone. I didn't even have to look. My thumb slid over the screen, opening the text message thread I had already queued up for Malik. My thumb moved to the keypad. 1-1-B. I pressed send. The signal was out. The trap was sprung. The perimeter was now active. The final piece of my structure, the demolition charge, was now live. And Derek, he was still scrambling on the table, a pathetic thrashing animal, completely unaware that the walls were now finally coming down. Derek was still scrambling, a pathetic thrashing animal on a table of polished wood, his fingers just inches from the digital recorder when the heavy oak door to the conference room burst open. It didn't just open, it was thrown open, slamming against the interior wall with a crack that sounded like a rifle shot. 3 men filled the doorway. The first was Malik, my old friend. He wasn't in uniform. He was in a windbreaker, his face a mask of cold, hard justice. Beside him stood 2 uniformed Atlanta police officers, their hands resting on their belts, their eyes locked on Derek. Derek froze. His entire body went rigid. He was still half on, half off the table, his ripped suit jacket hanging off one shoulder. He looked like a panicked animal caught in a floodlight. He slowly, agonizingly turned his head toward the door. He looked at the cops. He looked at Malik, and then he looked at me. In that one final look, he understood everything. The old man, the bank rules, the phone call, the entire meticulous 4-day construction of his own personal prison. It was never a meeting. It was a trap. "Derek Hayes," Malik's voice boomed in the small room. It was the voice of a man who was no longer off the books. "You're under arrest." "Arrest," Derek squeaked, his voice a pathetic high-pitched whine. He slid off the table, trying to straighten his ruined suit. "Arrest for what? This is a family misunderstanding." "You're under arrest," Malik said, taking a step into the room, the officers fanning out behind him, "for extortion." "Extortion?" Derek laughed, a hysterical bubbling sound. "That's insane. Who did I extort?" "Me," I said, my voice quiet. "You," he spat. "You have no proof." "Oh, but he does." Ms. Cynthia Rowe said, her voice cutting through his panic. She calmly picked up the digital recorder that Derek had failed to smash. "We have this. A bank-secured recording of you threatening your fragile wife's well-being if you didn't get your money." The officers moved in. One of them pulled Derek's hands behind his back. "You have the right to remain silent. You can't do this." Derek shrieked, his arrogance returning in a final pathetic burst. "This is a civil matter, a trust dispute. You have no right." And Cynthia Rowe continued as if he hadn't spoken, "While you're dealing with the state charges for extortion, my office has already forwarded this recording along with Mr. Turner's affidavit and the evidence of your $2 million Ponzi scheme directly to the regional office of the SEC. The blood drained from his face. That was the word that finally broke him. SEC. "The federal fraud case against you is no longer sealed, Mr. Hayes." Cynthia said, her voice like ice. You're not just a bad son-in-law. You're a federal fugitive. I imagine they'll be very happy to hear we found you." The fight went out of him. All of it. The man who had walked in wearing an Italian suit simply collapsed. The officers held him up as they clicked the handcuffs shut, and as the sound of that final click echoed in the room, a different sound came from the other side of the table. A long, slow, shuddering sigh. It was Maya. As the threat was neutralized, as the man who had been her son and her terror was finally put in chains, the strings that had held her up were cut. She didn't faint. She crumpled. She just folded in on herself, her body sliding forward out of the chair, her forehead coming to rest on the table. Her shoulders began to shake, silently at first and then with huge, racking, agonizing sobs. She wasn't crying in fear. She was crying in relief. The ghost was gone. The person was coming back. In an instant, Annette was out of her chair. She rounded the table, pushing past the officers, and wrapped her arms around our daughter. She didn't say, "It's okay." She just said, "I'm here. I've got you. Mama's got you." She held Maya's head against her chest, rocking her as 3 years of terror and abuse and silence finally came pouring out. The officers pulled Derek to his feet. He was a hollow shell, defeated. He had one last look for me. As they pulled him toward the door, he looked at me. His eyes were no longer arrogant. They weren't even angry. They were just empty. He was a man who had built his entire life on a foundation of lies, and he had just watched in real time as every single support was kicked out. I stood up. I looked him dead in the eye. I didn't say a word. I just looked. I let him see the engineer who had built this trap. I let him see the father who had protected his child. His foundation had collapsed. It was over. As they dragged him out the door, I turned away from the wreckage. I walked over to my wife and to my daughter. I placed my hand on my daughter's shaking back. She looked up, her eyes red, but for the first time in 3 years, they were her eyes. "Daddy," she whispered. "I'm here," I said. "It's over." The old structure was gone, demolished. The rebuilding, that starts today. This story teaches us that true strength isn't about loud confrontations, but about quiet, meticulous preparation. Predators often succeed by preying on those they underestimate. They mistake kindness for weakness and age for irrelevance. But wisdom, like a good foundation, is built over time. It teaches you to see the structural flaws in a person's character. The greatest act of love isn't just protecting your family with your heart. It's protecting them with your mind by building a plan so solid that the predator's own arrogance becomes the trigger for their collapse. What would you have done if you received that letter with the upside-down stamp? Let me know your plan in the comments below, and please like and subscribe if you believe in the power of a quiet plan.